Hi, my name is Gibson, and I'm the co-owner and creator of the Personal Development School. This is your daily breakthrough video, and in this video, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the impact hypervigilance has on an individual who is fearful avoidantly attached. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about where hypervigilance comes from, what it is, and then really the impact of it, because I think that it's something that sort of flies under the radar for a lot of people, where it's like fearful avoidance can know, for example, that they go to work and at the end of their workday, after being around a bunch of people in the office, they feel really exhausted and they have a tough time regrouping initially. Or after spending a lot of time in a social setting for a few hours, there can be a need to sort of withdraw or retract. And they can sometimes be confused and even self-judgmental, like self-judging, sort of shaming themselves and like, oh, I should be more extroverted. I should be able to, why am I so tired? What's wrong with me? These sorts of things. And I really want to talk about like actually what can be happening at the mind level, at the thought level throughout the day, and the impact that has, and then obviously the role that plays in our relationships as well. And I'll give you some tools and strategies at the end of the video as well, just to start working with some of this. It's not so much the hypervigilance, it's the major problem, because that's something that can sort of stay and you can notice details. It's actually what happens directly after the hypervigilance that becomes problematic and sometimes quite exhausting. And in my professional experience also seems to have a bit of a correlation or overlap with individuals experiencing chronic fatigue, just elevated like cortisol responses throughout the day. So we'll talk about some of this. So before I dive into the content, we are still doing a sale to support our community. We are doing 25% off of our membership bundles. So the coupon code is with you. I'll put a link in the video here as well as in the description box below. And it's for 3-month, 6-month, 12-month bundles or single course purchases. And with the All Access Membership Pass, you basically get access to every course that we have. So all the intro attachment style reprogramming courses, all the advanced ones about how your attachment style shows up, and your loved one's attachment styles show up, in the 6 stages of relationships and the rites of passage necessary to cross those stages. Courses about boundaries, codependency, enmeshment, people pleasing, basically a lot of things that are going to be really important for fearful avoidance. We did a poll as well, and 97% of our students inside of the school said that the personal development school has been life-changing. And that was one of our options in there, like how impactful has this been? And that was sort of the extreme, and that's what most people shared. So we were so friggin' excited and happy to see that. And yeah, anyways, so let's talk about this. So hypervigilance itself is basically a state of increased alertness. It's sort of like being able to super fine-tune your ability to pay attention to details. Now, people can be hypervigilant about different things. People can be hypervigilant about safety, potential risks or dangers, but people most often in the context when we're talking about hypervigilance, it means like hypervigilant to your immediate surroundings or to people around you. Now, fearful avoidance, we know, are also called disorganized attachment style. And a really big part of this is that most fearful avoidance, even at the baseline, even if there wasn't like an alcoholic or addict parent, there wasn't a tremendous amount of violence in the home or fighting or lying or betrayal, like even if all that didn't exist, a lot of fearful avoidance had a lot of punishment. So they had parents who were like very punishing and very strict. And so even individuals who are less fearful avoidant maybe didn't have the same degrees of intensity around them, maybe trauma-wise, but a little more just distress. They might have had individuals in their childhood where it was like they were being punished, the punishments were harsh, maybe they were spanked, maybe they were physically hurt. Obviously that brings us more to like a traumatic space. Maybe they were really yelled at when they would be punished, or maybe there was just this element of like a parent or caregiver taking their anger out on the fearful avoidant child. Now, what this does is it confuses the child, because the child wants to connect and attach to their caregivers to feel safe. But then if the caregiver isn't making them feel safe, then the child doesn't have a very strong attachment strategy. right? Especially if the caregivers are unpredictable in their emotions, if they're taking their anger out, if the punishments are super harsh one day, but then not the other. A lot of that inconsistency creates just this like confusion, and there's no cause and effect. Dismissive avoidance, you see them and there's a lot of emotional neglect, but eventually they learn, well, that's pretty constant. So I'm just going to learn to self-soothe, and that's my attachment strategy. It's to self. You see anxious, preoccupied individuals. Maybe there's inconsistency, but they learn to build in more positive than negative associations to the people around them. And so they go, okay, well, I'm just gonna, as my attachment strategy, really cling on and latch on to these individuals. And that makes me feel safe and loved and positively reinforced. Now, with fearful avoidance, they don't really have any consistency. There's no like direct cause and effect. And so what you'll see is that a lot of fearful avoidance, that's why they're called disorganized. Their strategies for attaching are disorganized. But as a natural byproduct of that, they develop hypervigilance. Their attachment strategy becomes, at a deeper level, the ability to read between the lines, notice microexpressions, body language, all these different things. So I've said that before on this channel. But what I really want to talk about here is like what this creates in the adult romantic relationship of a fearful avoidant. And what we'll often see is that fearful avoidance can go into places where there's authority figures especially, or a romantic relationship where they're replacing their caregiver relationship with their primary attachment figure, which is your romantic relationship in your adult life. And what I will see is that this hypervigilance it sort of becomes this like, not in a controlling way, not in a like manipulative way, but there becomes this need for the fearful avoidant to try to control the perceptions people have of them around them. And on one hand, that can seem like it's very approval seeking, very vain, caring a lot about what people think, things like this. That's not really what it is for the fearful avoidant. Yes, it can be, but usually it's about safety for the fearful avoidant. It's like if I can think 2 steps ahead of what this person might think, I can avoid punishment, right? Back in childhood, those subconsciously programmed associations, I can avoid punishment. I can avoid, intense conflict. I can avoid feeling shame, and so it's not so like, oh, I need to win everybody's approval. It's more like the sponsoring intention behind being hypervigilant and controlling people's perceptions of you is more like, I need to stay safe. I need to make sure that I'm protected when I enter into these situations. And I need to know that, what could go wrong at all corners and have an action plan or a strategy for that. And it's interesting. You'd be surprised how many fearful avoidants actually, when I've asked so many individuals these questions over the years, a lot of them spend a lot of time in their internal dialogue worrying about, if this person did this, then you would do that. If this bad thing happened over here, you would do this and then this and then that. And there tends to be this sort of dynamic where they'll spend a lot of time fearing punishment, being bad, being shamed. At a deeper level, it's all the subconscious associations stored around what that actually means. But they tend to have these very elaborate thought patterns when they're around groups of people. So for example, I was speaking to somebody the other day, and she's going back to school. She's like making a midlife career change to go into nutrition and wellness. And she was saying that she's doing a group project, and she was in this like Zoom meeting for a group project, obviously because of COVID and stuff online. And she said that she was sitting there worrying, like she turned something in and didn't know if everybody knew that it was her thing that she turned in. And she was worrying about, okay, I turned that in, I didn't put my name on it, I just dumped it into the Dropbox folder. I don't know if people know that it's me. I don't want people to think I'm not doing my part, but if I say something, then they'll think that I'm trying to say how much I did. And then she sort of started by saying something and sort of insinuating that it was hers. Then she thought somebody's reaction to her was not exactly what she hoped for. Then she started trying to be extra considerate and appreciative of that person in case the person was mad at her for saying she did so much work. Like, it was like this whole onslaught of like trying to manage everybody's perceptions and make sure that nobody thought she was bad, there's no conflict, she's walking on eggshells. Whereas like most people, an anxious preoccupied can have a touch of this, and people-pleasing dismissive avoidance can have a touch of this too in certain cases. But most people, both are a little more rare than the FA. most people will just be like, hey, I did that. That was my group project. And they're not really thinking about what if this person thinks this or if they think that, and let me act this way so that they see that. And that elaborateness or like detail of managing people's perceptions, when you're in that space, your body is going to be in sympathetic nervous system mode. You're going to be in a little bit of fight or flight, and you're having a little bit of cortisol production. When you sustain that for long periods of time, you get really tired. Like if you have elevated cortisol levels for long periods, you're tired. So if you go into your work day and you are around, and it's often triggered for FAs by authority figures, because it's that like subconscious stored association, authority figures in childhood, where parents who often like sometimes created these dynamics for the FA in childhood, right? So if you imagine an FA going in and feeling like that for 8 hours of a workday, 9 hours of a workday, 10 hours of a workday, often they come home and they're exhausted. And so then, they judge themselves. Why am I so tired? What's going on? But what actually has to exist is you might, unless you're actually going to reprogram hypervigilance, which isn't the easiest thing to do, but it's definitely a possibility. What you want to do is, it's not the hypervigilance, it's directly what takes place afterwards. It's the storytelling, it's the taking on people's perceptions, it's the buying in and investing in the belief that you need to control everybody's perceptions to stay safe. It's the investment in the idea that people are going to think that you're bad. It's the investment in the idea that you have to earn your worth everywhere that you go in order to stay safe, that you have to avoid punishment, that something bad is going to happen at any point in time, and you just have to sort of wait for the other shoe to drop. It's those belief patterns that you're carrying in those interactions with people that make the hypervigilance painful and cortisol production and stress elevated. And if that was different, then you would notice different shifts in behaviors and stuff like that. But as long as you didn't tell a story around it, or as long as previously stored subconscious beliefs that were scary, like something bad's about to happen, I'm going to be shamed or punished, as long as you're not carrying those things, then hypervigilance is sort of an indifferent thing. It's like, cool, maybe a superpower. You can notice a lot of different things about different people all the time, and that can be really interesting. But it's the storytelling in the negative, because of those previously stored subconscious beliefs being activated, that can become problematic. So I just wanted to really touch on that. Work on questioning those stories, work on noticing what yours are when you feel hypervigilant, and by reprogramming those things, even things like I'm responsible for other people's emotions, I have to be perfect to be safe. A lot of those core beliefs, they're not core beliefs, because core beliefs are technically your I am beliefs, but a lot of those like deeply embedded subconscious beliefs about self or other are things that you want to reprogram. And we reprogram through questioning stories repetitively and using repetition in a way that elicits an emotional response to oppose that original belief statement and equilibrate it accordingly. So I hope that all makes sense. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for being here. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.